Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments, Schools, Health Systems, and the Inflation Reduction Act webinar. This is the second webinar in a two-part series on how climate investments that were made through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act together represent the largest investment in climate resilience in the nation's history and are providing much-needed resources to communities across the country. You can access part one on Annie's Learning site. And we will also, I know some things have shifted over the past couple of weeks. Our speakers will talk to some of those specific pieces, but really what this webinar is looking at is how these climate and health investments really are making a lasting positive health outcomes for all Americans. And so specifically, the Inflation Reduction Act has offered incentives for businesses, school districts, governments, and health systems to transition to zero-emission vehicles, as well as renewable and clean energy resources. So each of our speakers today is going to talk about examples of programs that have been implemented through these IRA funding programs, specifically relating to electric school buses and then clean energy programs in health systems. So before I jump into our speakers, I want to run through some housekeeping items. So we want folks to please stay muted throughout the presentation. We are also offering one nursing CE for participation in this. You will receive an email following the webinar with the recording and a link to complete an evaluation and post-test. You must complete the evaluation and post-test to receive the nursing CE. We're going to be sending out a recording to all those who registered for the webinar, and it's going to be posted on Annie's Learning site. And so our first portion of the webinar is going to focus on electric school buses. And our first two speakers, I'll introduce them both, and then I'll turn it over to them for the presentations. So the first speaker, our first speaker here is Carolina Chacon, who is the coalition manager for the Alliance for Electric School Buses, a coalition convened by CHISPA of nonprofit organizations committed to electrifying the nation's school bus fleet, starting in the communities most harmed by air pollution and creating good jobs along the way. Carolina has over a decade of experience in community outreach and education, community organizing, communications and strategy, and project management. And for the last 6 years, she has worked as a consultant with the environmental field on campaigns for clean energy, lands protection, and climate action with a focus on elevating marginalized voices. Our second speaker, who's going to be talking about electric school buses, is Kendra Wyde, who has been an advocate for advocating for climate and air quality and public health in Michigan since 2015, and is the coalition coordinator for It's Electric, Michigan's electric school bus coalition. Kendra is also a critical care RN and strongly believes that everyone deserves to breathe clean, healthy air. She supports Moms Clean Air Force, field organizers in their outreach around electric school buses to EPA, school districts, and other stakeholders. So I'll turn it over to the two of you for your presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And my name is Carolina Chacon. I'm the coalition manager for the Alliance for Electric School Buses, and I'm going to have the pleasure of going first. Thankfully, don't have to go after Kendra, who has an amazing presentation prepared. And thank you all so much for inviting me to be here today. Even as so many things are very uncertain right now, it's great to be with like-minded folks who care so much about protecting our access to clean air. So thank you for your time, and I'm going to go ahead and get started with my presentation. So as Kara said, we are a diverse coalition of not-for-profit organizations that are all united in our commitment to an equitable transition of the nation's school bus fleet, starting in the communities that are most impacted by air pollution and creating well-paying careers and jobs along the way. As you can see here, these are just some of the many members of our coalition that span across over 24 groups that deal with the environment, labor, community, equity, that work at the local, federal, and state level across 40 different states. Today, I really want to just spend some time talking about why electric school buses are important and their benefits, and then the Clean School Bus Program and other programs that might be relevant to federal funding and health, and then what you can do. And then happy to take any questions as well. So please do put those in the chat as they come up for you. So really quickly, just want to run through some of the benefits of electric school buses to give us some grounding as to why this is an important topic for us today. We know that electric school buses are the healthiest option for our children today. They produce zero tailpipe emissions, which protect students from harmful air pollutants that can lead to asthma, cancer, and other heart and lung illnesses. Studies have also shown that diesel pollution can also impact students' scores in English and math tests, and even in how many days they miss of school. Electric school buses are the clear solution. They clean up the air our children breathe as they ride to and from school. And that is the reason that we're all here today, is to improve the health of kids. Electric school buses also have environmental benefits in that they are cleaner for the communities that they drive through, since they don't emit toxic tailpipe exhausts that can pollute our neighborhoods. They are also cleaner for the climate. They reduce overall climate pollution because producing electricity is a lot cleaner than producing diesel or any other fossil fuel. We know that transportation is the biggest source of climate pollution in the country. And we also know that electrifying the entire fleet of electric school buses by 2030 would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 9 million metric tons per year, which is the equivalent of taking about 2 million gas cars off the road. And again, we have been able to find that this reduction in climate pollution is true across all the major grids of the United States. And so, as you can see here, this is true for electric school buses, even when compared to diesel and propane, which is another popular choice right now. Electric school buses can also save bus operators a lot of money. For school districts, this means 40 to 60% fewer maintenance costs because they have many fewer parts than diesel school buses do. And so this is funding that can be repurposed by schools for other expenditures. We've seen schools that have been able to hire additional teachers or give their bus drivers a raise because of these cost savings. Here you can see just some of the other ways that school districts are saving money, typically in fueling costs. We have examples from school districts across the country that are reporting on how they're saving money with electric school buses, which again can make a big difference in a school district's budget, which is typically already limited and under-resourced. Additionally, electric school buses are performing well across the country. In nearly every single US state, we're already seeing them roll out. They are operating in the cold weather. Was just on a previous call earlier where folks were mentioning that their electric school buses are doing well, even in the dead of winter, whether that's in Minnesota or other cold places, but they can also tackle West Virginia hills, Arizona heat, you name it. They have a great torque for climbing steep slopes. They're easier to manage on ice and snow because they have a lower center of gravity. There is some impact to battery range from air conditioning or heating, but the technology is improving rapidly, and most of all, drivers love them. Typically, after a driver has gotten to experience an electric school bus, they become a champion for bringing more to their school districts and don't want to give up those routes. We also know that electric school buses can be an asset to the grid because they have a predictable schedule. They can help manage demand on the electric grid, especially for using managed charging. They can also provide vehicle to grid or vehicle to building services during peak demand emergencies, which can make communities more resilient. We've seen examples of this happen in San Diego, near San Diego, where school buses help keep the lights on during an extreme heat wave. We've seen school districts that have been able to collect revenue from delivering energy back to the grid. Although this is still mostly in the piloting stage, it's a really exciting opportunity to think about how electric school buses can fit into the role that schools already play, being a center for communities in the wake of emergencies or natural disasters. And lastly, we know that by replacing electric school buses in the most polluted communities, we can improve air quality for families that are already breathing the dirtiest air, whether that is low-income families, Black, Latina, and Indigenous communities, as well as students with disabilities who are already most impacted by air pollution. So now I'm going to talk about the federal funding programs that relate to electric school buses and kind of give you a status report of where we are. There is one major program, the EPA Clean School Bus Program, that you've likely heard about before. This program has provided up to $5 billion in funding. Half of that funding was allocated specifically for zero emission buses, the other half specifically for zero or low emission buses, which includes propane and CNG. This was a program that was created as part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law of 2021, also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. As I mentioned earlier, this isn't just for electric school buses. It can include zero emission as well as propane or CNG, although there are currently no CNG school buses on the market. The funding has been provided since 2022 in the forms of grants or rebates. EPA has been alternating between these two options. They've done 3 rebate rounds so far and one grant round that was competitive. So both of these are provided up front so that school districts don't have to put up the money on their own. And EPA has been doing this very successfully now for a couple of years. As a matter of fact, they have been able to award nearly $3 billion for over 8,500 clean school buses at over 1,200 school districts across all 50 states, Washington, D.C., as well as 4 U.S. territories and roughly 60 federally recognized tribes. 90% of these 95% of these buses are electric school buses, which mirrors the demand and application for electric models that they are receiving. Approximately 75% of the school districts that have been awarded this funding are defined as low income, rural, or tribal, based on the prioritization that was included in the bipartisan infrastructure law for this program, which again specifically said that there needed to be a priority for funding for low income, rural, and tribal schools. And we are seeing that. It's been successful to date at delivering electric school buses where you see here on the map. Additionally, this map is a little bit more detailed in terms of the relative number of school buses that have been awarded by school district. Larger circles indicate where more buses have been awarded in that county. School districts in Arizona, California, Illinois, North Carolina, and Texas have been awarded more than 1,000 new buses in those states. So we've seen some really great progress, particularly in the Southeast, in terms of more electric school buses going to communities that maybe folks wouldn't suspect. According to the World Resources Institute, more than 1,800 electric school buses have already been delivered to U.S. schools under that program. That number was as of last August of last year, so it has likely increased. They also calculated that more than 750 electric school buses across 40 states, again, using EPA funding, have already been deployed. The deliveries are not noted on this map, but we are certainly tracking that as well. And again, that number is likely a lot larger since they last calculated that last year. Additionally, as you can see, this funding has been substantial and it has been successful and popular and in high demand, but it's not sufficient to meet the level of demand that we are seeing. EPA has received nearly $8 billion in applications for the Clean School Bus Program, but the program has already been only able to give out just under $3 billion of the total $5 billion that it was appropriated. We did see another $900 million in applications that arrived in January of this year when EPA closed the 4th round of the program, which was a round of rebates. We've seen that around 693 school districts have been so happy with the program that they've applied multiple times. So they applied once and then applied again through these 4th rounds. 91 school districts have applied multiple times and have been awarded multiple times. So there's a lot of folks that are going back for seconds, essentially, because they have benefited and enjoyed the program so much. We still see a huge waiting list in the rebate rounds. At least 1,200 school districts are on that waiting list. There's even more that applied for competitive grants and were not selected. And again, this last round that just closed a couple weeks ago saw another $900 million in applications. I also want to highlight that this program is tackling air pollution directly. This is an estimate that EPA just produced in their report to Congress. It includes the emissions that have been reduced just from the very first round of rebate awards in 2022. These projected emissions are based on emissions at the source of the vehicle, including from the tailpipe, evaporative systems, and brake and tire wear that would occur over the operational lifetime of a new clean school bus. These values are initial estimates that EPA expects to be able to update as more information becomes available. But you can see that already just that first round of electric school buses is making a program in improving our air quality. Another huge program that EPA has been leading over the last year is a clean heavy duty vehicle program. This program is similar to the Clean School Bus program, but different. It was created by the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, so it came later as part of that Build Back Better package. This is a $1 billion program, so slightly smaller than the Clean School Bus program I was just mentioning. At least 735 million were announced in awards just last year, towards the end of the year. Approximately 70% of that went to electric school buses, or about 490 million. Unlike the Clean School Bus program, this program only funds zero emission electric vehicles, but it does include vehicles other than school buses. And so that can include transit buses, garbage trucks, delivery trucks, utility or box trucks. But essentially, again, the majority of the funding did go towards electric school buses. This grant program, this was a grant program, at least so far, in what EPA has been able to deliver. And so it was competitive, which meant that those grant proposals that were submitted were scored, ranked, and then selected, a little bit different and a little bit more time intensive for many school districts than the Clean School Bus program. They really had to compete for that funding. And again, it was focused only on electric vehicles. So you can see in this map, this is not the best map that EPA has produced, but it is the one that they've provided for where the awards went, which included over 2,400 vehicles. They were able to award over 70 applicants. We don't have a full list of who applied, so unfortunately, I can't tell you how many were rejected. But again, because it was competitive, we know some applications were rejected. This includes 27 states, 3 tribal territories, and 1 US territory. Out of those vehicles, about 1,600 are going to be electric school buses. What is exciting about this program is that it was able to prioritize air quality. And so that was included as part of the prioritization in the law of the bill itself, in the text of the bill itself. The Clean School Bus program, again, prioritized low income, rural, and tribal school districts. Our coalition, along with many other partners, pressured EPA to consider air quality, but because it wasn't in the text of the law, EPA didn't feel like they could do that for the rebates, but they were able to include that after much pressuring, again, from advocates and communities and experts such as yourselves. They were able to include that in their grant round, which did prioritize communities that were considered disadvantaged, and that included communities in non-attainment of federal air quality standards. But that was only in the grants portion of the Clean School Bus program, whereas the majority of the funding for the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicle program was destined for communities breathing the worst air. So that is something that we've particularly loved about this program, is that, again, it is tackling the root of the problem, which is dirty air. In addition to these 2 major programs at EPA, we also have the tax credits that were created as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. They can complement the grants and rebates that I was just talking about from those EPA programs. 2 key tax credits were available and newly available to school districts because of elective payment. Entities that usually don't have a tax liability, that don't file federal taxes, were actually able to claim these tax credits, essentially receiving a reimbursement. That includes the 45W Qualified Commercial Clean Vehicle Tax Credit, which provided up to $40,000 per electric school bus, and the 30C Alternative Fuel Vehicle Refueling Property Tax Credit, which is just a fancy word to say charger or other fueling station, that provided up to $100,000 per charger, which is huge because infrastructure can eat up a lot of these grants and rebates that school districts are receiving. Both of these tax credits can be paired, again, with the grants and rebates that EPA has been handing out, which made it really exciting for school districts to be able to stack all of this funding and stretch those public dollars further. However, and I take no pleasure in saying this, unfortunately, all of this funding is now at risk. The incoming administration has issued an executive order, as many of you have heard, that put a pause on all funding that is related to the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. And there is a review going of these programs undergoing right now at EPA and all other relevant agencies. For 90 days, they have to pause all funding going out the door while those agencies provide recommendations to the White House on how the programs can meet other executive orders issued by the White House relating to energy dominance and fossil fuels. So these programs could be defunded by Congress potentially. Even if Congress doesn't act, they could be reprogrammed by their respective agencies. And again, if Congress chooses, they could also just repeal the programs in whole or in part. So we are in a very tricky situation where these programs have been successful, awards have gone out, communities have celebrated them, electric school buses have been delivered, and in many cases, awardees have started spending money, and now that funding is frozen. What does that mean exactly? Well, funding that has been awarded but not yet distributed, again, can be further delayed or repurposed, even if the funds are legally obligated. That includes particularly anyone that's won a grant, because grant awards aren't given in full, as many of you may be aware. Grant awardees withdraw the funding in portions at a time, and they're currently being locked out of being able to withdraw that funding. Rebates are a little bit safer because EPA provided essentially an upfront check, an amount that school districts then spent. And so that funding has already gone out the door by and large, but grants, not as much. And then EPA did also announce the winners for the 2022 rebates kind of late last year. And so any of those folks that didn't meet their deadline or got an extension from EPA, all of this legal, to put the proof of purchase order in to receive their upfront rebate, essentially their voucher. If they didn't meet those deadlines or they haven't already done that, their funding would also be frozen, which could be up to another $908 million. On top of the funding that was already awarded or announced, there's also the funding that remains in each program that was appropriated by Congress but has not yet been awarded by their respective agencies. That includes $2 billion that remain of the $5 billion Clean School Bus Program. Again, EPA did launch an application earlier or late last year for $900 million of that, but that funding has also been frozen. The Clean Heavy Duty Vehicle Program is a $1 billion program. They awarded $735 million, so about $200 million remain. And then tax credits that any school district was planning to claim via direct payment could be at risk of not being delivered in the future. Although I will note that for tax credits, Congress has to specifically act to rescind those essentially. And even then, it would not necessarily take effect until the next tax year. But funding is certainly at risk in this moment in time. Even if the funding is not directly repealed, we are concerned that under the new administration, they may redirect or reprogram the Clean School Bus Program to fund more propane school buses over zero emission buses. So we are waiting to see what recommendations they might make as part of this pause about how the program can better meet the goals of the new administration. So you might be asking yourself, what can I do? A couple simple things that we do recommend is that if you are aware of the benefits that these programs have brought to your communities, contact your congressional representatives and let them know. If you have relationships with EPA, now is the time to let them know how these programs have helped your community, and if repealed or rescinded or reprogrammed, the impacts that this would have on children's health. So not quite a cheery note, but this is the time to act. And with that, I will pass it on to Kendra, who can speak a little bit more to the health aspect of all of this, and happy to take any questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. That was excellent. Please let me know if everybody can see my screen. Good.
Yep, we can.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks for summarizing that. You did that very eloquently and concisely. Thank you. You're going to make my job much, much easier. So thanks for joining us all this afternoon. We're here to highlight how the investments in the BIL and IRA have supported programs to improve the health of school children and the climate, specifically as they relate to electric school buses. And I wanted to share with you a specific example here in Michigan. My name is Kendra Wide. I am a registered nurse. I work part-time in a medical ICU, and then I also work part-time as an air quality advocate in Michigan since 2015. And my advocacy with electric school buses started back in 2020 when I was asked to lead the Electric School Bus Coalition. And that was a great way to combine my passion for the environment with my passion for public health and my passion for bedside nursing. So I want to just share with you how the EPA's Clean School Bus Program actually jump-started ESB adoption in Michigan. ESB means electric school bus. In 2020, Michigan had already had 17 electric school buses on the road among 7 different school districts. And this was through a funding mechanism through the state, through the VW Mitigation Trust. And the aim of this program was to transition diesel vehicles to cleaner alternatives. So these early adopters were actually real and continue to be and are our best advocates for electric school buses in the state. And they have also given us the rationale to help push for further federal funding and for further state funding. So we work to share the success stories of these original early adopters, and we were able to advocate for federal legislation, which then was realized in the bipartisan infrastructure law with the creation of the Clean School Bus Program, which Carolina had already eloquently summarized for us. Once that program awarding was announced, our coalition then went to work trying to share this funding opportunity with school districts across the state. And Michigan was pretty successful in the first round, and I just want to share with you how they did briefly with each round so you can see a specific example of what this looked like on the ground. Our primary success was in round 1, which saw 25 school districts awarded 133 electric school buses. Demand was very high for this first round, and advocates were able to leverage those that were on the wait list as rationale for pushing for a state-funded program to complement the EPA's Clean School Bus Program, and we were successful in getting state funding in addition to the federal funding. As Carolina mentioned, there were 2 different types of award mechanisms, and in round 2 grants, Michigan received award announcements for an additional 66 electric school buses among 8 different school districts. And this is, if you'll remember, she mentioned that this grant program actually looked at air quality in its determination of the competitive grants. And so we really worked hard to make sure that communities with poor air quality were aware of this funding and were applying. In round 3 rebates, Michigan school districts received an additional electric school buses across 29 school districts. So this is called the Electric School Bus Initiative, Electric School Bus Data Dashboard. It's through WRI, and I can share this link with folks later so they can investigate how their individual state is doing. But to date, this shares with us what the progress is for each state, how many buses they've awarded, and this includes all federal and state other funding mechanisms for electric school buses. But what we can see here is that in Michigan, we have over 5,000 kids that are getting a cleaner ride to school. And that's super important to folks like us on the call. And then I just wanted to share with you this map created by the Environmental Law and Policy Center, which looked at the current distribution of all of our awards through all of the different funding mechanisms, both federal and state. So you can see that we have a really unique geographic distribution in colder climates in the Upper Peninsula, and then also in the metropolitan, more polluted areas in the southern part of the state. I want to share this video with you, and I'm hoping that it will play. Let's try here first, and then I'll try a separate link if it doesn't. But this is an example of a northern rural school district that took advantage of the EPA electric school bus funding, Clean School Bus Program. Can you all see that video? I'm going to push play.
We can see it, but we're not hearing any sound.
You can see, but you're not getting any sound.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me try. You know what? For the sake of time, I'm going to share the video with you all because I don't want to delay, but it's a great example of electric school buses being employed in rural Michigan. I'll share it with you. You can all watch it at a later time, and I'll go back to my slides here. Just 1 second. Here we go. Okay, sorry about that. All right. So should see my slides again. Everybody good? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. So let's just talk really quickly because we're all health professionals and we're all getting a continuing education credit for this. So I wanted to just share with you the current research on electric school buses and diesel exhaust and how it impacts health and children's health specifically. So as health professionals, it's important for us to understand the health harms of diesel exhaust, which, as we know, is a known trigger for asthma, as well as other chronic respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. Specifically in Michigan, on an average school day, over 700,000 children travel 900,000 miles collectively. There are approximately 17,000 school buses in Michigan, and a very small portion of those, you saw about roughly over 300 are actually electric. So the majority of which of our school buses are diesel powered. So that's a lot of time for exposure to diesel exhaust for our kids. So bus riding school children, bus drivers, and mechanics, as well as teachers and other school personnel are all exposed to diesel at varying levels throughout their day. And this is not to mention the communities through which these buses travel. Asthma is one of the leading causes of absenteeism for school children. It's associated with over 10 million missed school days annually across the nation. And diesel exposure can also lead to poor concentration and behavior challenges on the bus and in the classroom. Diesel exhaust is produced by the combustion of diesel fuel, and it contains these major pollutants here. Please note that nitrogen oxides are a precursor to ground level ozone formation. This graphic is from the American Lung Association's report, The Road to Clean Air. It came out in 2020, and this is a very concise depiction of the health impacts of both particulate matter and ozone. And as demonstrated here, inhalation of these pollutants has many varied effects on human health throughout the life course. Particulate matter, or PM, is often referred to as soot, and it's a broad category used for a wide range of toxic particles that vary in size from 10 microns, which is visible to the human eye, kind of like dust that you can see, to as small as 2.5 microns, or 1/20th the size of a human hair, and you can see that represented here by the red dots. There are also particles that are even smaller than 1 micron. They're called ultrafine particulate matter. And to date, those are researched, but they are not regulated by EPA. And as PM 2.5 is smaller, it's small that when it's inhaled, it actually passes through the bloodstream during oxygen exchange, and from there it travels throughout the body, causing a cascade of inflammation as it goes. So for comparison, I wanted to show you what a diesel particle looks like in relationship to PM 2.5. And the diesel particle is on the top right. And I'd like you to please take note of the surface area of the particle. It has lots of nooks and crannies. And this is an opportunity for toxic air chemicals to hitchhike along with the particle as it travels throughout the body, triggering inflammation along the way. And the diagram on the left depicts the resulting effects on the lungs and systemically throughout the body. So what does the research tell us about electric school buses? Some of you may be asking, how drastically does transitioning to a cleaner school bus impact health? And here's a summary of the major research studies to date. The first landmark study was from 2015, and it aimed to evaluate the health impacts of diesel emission reduction policies among school bus riding children. And in 2010, there was a new heavy-duty vehicle standard, and it was introduced by EPA, which is aimed at reducing nitrogen oxides and particulate matter pollution. So this was an opportunity for us to conduct a natural experiment assessing air quality and health among school children as diesel school buses transitioned to cleaner technologies and alternative fuels. And their findings suggested that when children ride buses with clean air technologies and or fuels, they experienced lower exposures to air pollution, less pulmonary inflammation, and more rapid lung growth over time, and reduced absenteeism than when they were on buses, than they were on than when they were on buses without these technologies or fuels. The next research study aimed to assess the impacts of upgrading to cleaner school buses on district attendance specifically. The study showed school districts who had upgraded to cleaner school buses had greater attendance outcomes and improvements in comparison to districts that had not, resulting in over 350,000 estimated additional student days of attendance per year. These attendance benefits were found to be the highest among districts where ridership was high and where the oldest, dirtiest buses were replaced. And then this most recent study, this came out last year, this was from the Harvard School of Public Health. It looked to assess the health and climate benefits of replacing diesel buses with electric school buses. They estimated that this may yield up to almost $250,000 in climate and health benefits per individual bus replaced. The researchers found that these benefits, including fewer greenhouse gas emissions and reduced rates of adult mortality and childhood asthma, and their associated savings are strongest in the largest cities and among fleets with the oldest buses. So to date, the research on cleaner school buses shows very positive impacts on health, attendance, air quality, and climate pollution. The benefits are greatest when the oldest and dirtiest diesel buses are replaced. So it's really clear that the investments on electric school buses and BIL and IRA have had direct health and climate impacts, ones that are being realized today. And we need to advocate for these programs to continue because all kids deserve to have a clean ride to school and a healthy planet for their future. So thank you very much. Sorry that video didn't play, but I will share it. I think it's worth watching. It's just 3 minutes. And it shows a really great rural northern Michigan school that took advantage of electric school buses for their students. Thank you. Kara?
Thank you both, Carolina and Kendra, for that amazing presentation on electric school buses. I live in Baltimore City, and Baltimore City did get some electric school buses, and I had the opportunity to go to a meeting where they had them. Kendra was there, and it was really cool to experience being on an electric school bus and just learning more about the program. Very important program. So we'll definitely keep you all looped in terms of some of the pieces that Carolina mentioned around advocating for continuation of the program because of, such great success across the country. So thank you both so much. And then we're going to take a bit of a shift here, talking about clean energy and health systems. And so very excited to have Dr. Darlene Melk with us. And let me just give Dr. Melk just a quick introduction here. Dr. Melk is the Chief Medical Officer, and I know I'm going to say this wrong. You're going to have to correct me when you go into your presentation. Chiraquatra Community Health Center. It was so wrong. Dr. Melk joined the center in 2010 as a community pediatrician, and over the next 10 years served as Director of Community Pediatrics and Director of Community Medicine before becoming Chief Medical Officer in 2020. Dr. Melk was appointed in 2024 by the Arizona governor to the Arizona Early Childhood Development and Health Board, which is a first things first state level directorate. Dr. Melk is also served as a board member for the Western Clinician Network and was elected president for 1-year term. Dr. Melk additionally served on the steering committee for Douglas Education Partnership Council and is currently chair of Pediatric Leaders Peer Network Committee for the Arizona Association of Community Health Centers. So we're thrilled to have Dr. Melk here talk about the center's program around clean energy. Turn it over to you, Dr. Melk.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very nice introduction. And just as a disclaimer, my fellow chief, Dennis Walto, was going to present on our behalf, but he's actually up in DC right now at the National Association of Community Health Centers. They have a policies forum every year. And so he's at that meeting today and asked me to step in. So apologize if I maybe don't have the breadth of information. And it's definitely a shift in what was just presented regarding the electric school buses. I found that fascinating as a pediatrician. I was like, oh my gosh, we need these everywhere. That's wonderful. But of course, not exciting or not happy to hear that the funding is not in place currently. So my presentation is about solar energy. And so, and the reason that we chose to go in this route is not necessarily, I mean, it was, I would say, dual purpose, right? Of course, we are definitely about clean energy as an organization, but at the end of the day, it also was a very big operational and business decision. So I'm going to just share a couple of slides. Let's see if I can. Yeah, I think so. That I have here. Let's see, make sure I'm in the right presentation mode. Up. All right. Hopefully you can see full screen. So yes, I work at a federally qualified health center called Chiricahua Community Health Centers, and we are located right on US-Mexico border. Let's see, there we go. Our service area is Cochise County, which is actually 6,200 square miles. It's very rural. It's actually larger than Rhode Island and Connecticut combined. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a comparison of the geography that we are trying to cover. Yet it is home to roughly about 125,000 residents. So we're pretty spread out. So we always like to point out how we compare to other countries. We're larger geographically than 80 countries in the UN and UN recognized, and then exceeding population of 40 other countries. But yes, we share 100 miles of the US-Mexico border. And so we serve approximately a quarter of the county's residents. And that we do with 10 brick and mortar buildings. And then we have a fleet of mobile clinics that also reach those populations that just for whatever reason, either their community is so small that it hasn't made sense to build a clinic there, or there might be transportation barriers that we are trying to overcome. So we serve clinic or patients through our mobiles as well. We, see quite a few patients and offer the breadth of primary care services, and we are a safety net as a federally qualified health center. I think maybe, I don't know how many people are aware of federally qualified health centers, but by federal law, we are unable to turn anybody away based on the ability to pay. So that means we are a safety net, but we are also by federal law asked to provide primary care. And I would say our health center really focuses quite a bit on prevention. Prevention is like what we live, right? So prevention visits, but a huge part of prevention is through immunizations. And so this is going to come into play as to why we were very motivated to move in this direction with the solar energy. So where we struggle, so one of our sites is actually where we offer probably the most, we're one of the largest employers, I failed to mention, in the top 10 in our county. We have 431 employees, but almost half of them come from Douglas, which is right on the US-Mexico border. It's actually where I'm standing. I live right in this community and live here. In Douglas, we have an adult clinic, we have dental clinic, we have 2 pediatric clinics, we have an administrative building, and we have a call center. And so you can imagine how much we rely on power to operate, to just daily operations to provide the services that we do. And unfortunately, because of the power grid, we have suffered the loss of power during monsoon season. So here in Arizona, typically during the summer, for about 2 months, we will get storms every single afternoon. It's pretty predictable. And it's almost become predictable that we will lose power at some point. And that becomes a huge problem when you're trying to keep thousands and thousands of dollars worth of vaccines refrigerated, or you're trying to operate dental equipment. We just are totally reliant on that power. And we have had to have circumstances where we've shut down and had to send everybody home because the power wasn't going to go back on. So this came to us as an opportunity not only to do something positive for the environment, but also to keep our operations going. And so we see that as a dual purpose. And that actually is the very short, succinct presentation. But I am happy to take any questions. But yes, we were very fortunate to be, because of the Inflation Reduction Act, to get the funding to have this happen. So this is not something that we are funding as a health center, but in partnership with another organization through that special funding opportunity. And that, I'm sorry, is my short presentation. But I guess you could, plenty of time for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Milk. That was fantastic. And I didn't realize the background around the extreme weather and the almost the need to build resilience in there, as well as ensuring that transition to clean energy. So that's fantastic. So we do have time for questions if folks want to pop them in the chat, or we have I think a small enough group that we can have folks come off mute if they'd like and ask a question. I'll just pause and see if anyone has any questions. I'll ask a question while people are thinking, but Dr. Milk, especially since you're, a pediatrician, so you have experience working with the frontline care providers, I'm curious how you kind of are messaging to the staff around the purposes for the solar project and how staff are engaging around that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that what we are trying to do is, as an organization, just take advantage of every opportunity that we can to, like I said, make the environment a better place, and then also have that sustainability. And so that's basically the message that we've been sending, is that this has been an incredible opportunity for us to have, clean energy, and then also make sure that we have more stability in our operations. And so I think staff can really rally around that. It's very disruptive, as you can imagine. I mean, we actually have like downtime procedures, like what do we do when the power goes out? Because it's become so like part of what we know that to expect, unfortunately. So the staff, especially in Douglas, where I live, are incredibly excited about this, to be honest. So yeah, no, we see it as a wonderful opportunity for us to do something better for the environment, but then also to continue to serve our patients seamlessly. That's our goal. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, sure.
Any other questions folks might have? Yeah, Tracy, please go ahead.
Well, I hate to get political, but I'm heading to Richmond tomorrow to talk to our legislators. And I guess I'd ask any of the speakers, or Carolyn especially, to address what you were going into at one point, is sort of the redirection and refunding of different projects, and how to talk to our legislators. It just so happens the two that I'm going to speak with tomorrow are supportive of our efforts, but to turning around some others that now are getting permission to say that these funds are excessive or things like that. I just maybe some thoughts on how to address that. Did you start by saying no politics, Kara, at the beginning?
I did not say that, but I'll turn it over to our speakers too, who feels able to say that within their limitation.
Yeah, and I can speak to that a little bit. Thank you so much, Kara. It's tough right now, understandably. I think one thing that we're cautioning for everyone is not to assume that whoever you speak with knows about the program, because there are so many programs that are at risk that have been named, that it's very likely that perhaps they're not familiar with it. And so they may not know how it's benefited, how the program is structured. And so I think just some education about what this program does is really important. Something we have heard consistently with the new administration and some other leaders is that they are particularly concerned about programs that mandate a particular fuel, a particular vehicle, or that limit consumer choice. And one thing that we are trying to really highlight with these programs that I've mentioned is that they are completely voluntary. So school districts chose to apply to, in many cases, take time and resources, staffing, hire grant writers to apply for the programs because they saw a need for their communities. We know that school transportation budgets tend to be overlooked. It tends to be something that's the first thing that gets cut. And so this federal funding is filling an area that many school districts need help with. And so these are voluntary programs. No one is required to mandate. There is no mandate that school districts need to transition to electric school buses at the federal level. And so highlighting that, removing these programs removes help that school districts are relying upon, but it does remove consumer choice because these programs made it easier to choose cleaner alternatives, not just electric, but even propane, because even a propane bus costs more than a diesel bus. School districts just tend to buy older diesel models that are cheapest. And so attacking that from a point of view of here's how we can educate you about this completely voluntary program that expands consumer choice. All of electric school buses are also manufactured in the United States or in North America. So, if we're talking about competitiveness with China, the school bus industry is by and large an American industry. These buses are made in North America, and it helps create and maintain those manufacturing jobs. So we do have a list of different ways to kind of talk about the program in ways that maybe folks aren't aware. And I'm happy to share that with folks. But I think more than anything, folks may not know that in their communities, they've likely received an electric school bus. And so we have a map of all the congressional districts in the country, and most of them have received an electric school bus, the majority of them. And so they may just not know that, their communities have benefited from this funding. They may not know that school districts applied for this funding and maybe didn't even get it. And so just that level of education, I think, is helpful. There's a lot of misinformation flying out there about what programs to cut. And we want to caution people about, what these programs, the benefits that they actually provide and how they're structured.
Thank you so much.
I just thought of something that I thought would connect our two topics, Dr. Milk. There are some examples of electric school buses providing backup power, and the batteries are very large. They have a very set specific schedule for charging. And there have been some agreements between school districts and their municipality or community to serve as backup power during periods of power outages. So that might be something that you can investigate with local schools, maybe see if they've had any sort of awards in your county, and could be an opportunity to enhance community resilience during times. We know medical equipment is extremely important and susceptible to power outages, and people's health are directly linked to electricity, and so that's something that some other school districts across the country have been doing.
That's a wonderful idea. We have a very close relationship because of, I guess, one of the benefits of being in a rural area is you become very, very familiar with our community partners, especially when we're trying to work towards the same ultimate goal of building a healthier community. But yeah, to my knowledge, I mean, this was a very informational for me. I'm sure I got more out of the talk than than you all did, but I hadn't been aware of all of the electric school buses and the funding and where they were. And I was kind of glancing at the map to see if maybe there was something down in Cochise County. So no, I'm definitely curious to look into it more. That's a great idea.
Any other questions for our speakers? All right, well, if everyone can join me in thanking our speakers for their amazing presentations. I learned a lot too, and I've been knew about these programs for some time, so I really appreciate the three of you joining us and sharing a little bit more insight into these these really important programs in terms of health impacts. So just as a reminder, everyone who registered for the webinar will receive an email from us with information about how to obtain your continuing education. But I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and thank you for spending your afternoon with us.
Thank you.